What is up? This is the Leafs Convo podcast for Vanguard Northeast Realty in Scarborough, VanguardNE.ca. It is Friday, June 7th, 2019. I'm your host, Norman James, along with my podcast partner in crime, Mike Augello. Mr. A, Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final was exhilarating, and the Blues are one win away from clinching their first ever Stanley Cup.
Good morning, Norman. Yeah, it's a little surprising based on how dominating the Bruins were in Game 3, but the Game 4 for the Blues was a tour de force. It was physical, and they really ramped it up against the Bruins. And then last night in Game 5, they get that early goal. Ryan O'Reilly scoring, and I mean the Bruins are a tough out no matter what, but I think the Blues have sort of found their pace, found what they needed to do to beat the Bruins, and that's be physical. And they got what I would say is a major break on that non-call on Achari by Tyler Bozak, which, I'm sure Leaf fans are sort of giggling a little bit, and then ended up in the game-winning goal. And I don't know if you saw the video of Cam Neely firing a bottle of Dasani or whatever, or Aquafina against the wall, but I think Leaf fans just had a feeling of a little bit of joy when they saw that.
Yeah, I have nothing against Cam Neely, but I don't really care. And then Zdeno Chara with the mask, the glass, the visor. Weird. But, I mean, he's got to do it to protect himself. He is a geriatric.
I honestly, it's funny because the lead up, the 2 days after Game 4, he's not going to play. I knew he was going to play. I was doing some radio stuff on Buffalo radio on Wednesday, and I said I think he's going to play. I mean, it's you see Vince Dunn playing for St. Louis with a broken jaw. We've seen players play with broken jaws before, but I mean, it still is. I mean, better him than I. I give him full credit for having that puck from Braden Shen slammed into his face, and then 48 hours later he's back on the ice playing. The guy is a fiend. He's unbelievable.
Yes, he certainly is, and I make jokes about people because I love them and I respect them. The guy has done so much, and he's rounded third base on his career. It's just how long is it going to take him to get to home plate, and he certainly wants to slow it down because hockey's his life. He loves the game, and who knows, maybe in the off season he decides that it's time to hang him up, and if that's the case, he's going to go full bore no matter how he's feeling physically. This is the Leafs Convo podcast for Vanguard Northeast Realty in Scarborough, VanguardNE.ca. Ryan O'Reilly and his brother Cal at a London Costco about, 8 years ago with the girlfriends, the father, my young family in line behind them. It took them about a half hour to check out. These guys with lots of money furnishing a beautiful cottage. That was an interesting experience to watch. All of that merchandise run through and all of the flatbeds with big screens and couches and stuff like that. I won't tell you what the bill was, but Ryan, I know him from covering junior hockey. You remember, he played for the Erie Otters, too. Everyone thinks it was just Connor McDavid. Man, that organization's had so many great players. But the bill would blow your mind. Well into the 5 digits, Michael. But I digress. Fun little story, though. Let's get back to the Maple Leafs. What are they learning from what the Blues are doing? Never mind the Bruins. We know the Bruins were a notch above, and maybe the Leafs can be that notch above in the next season to come. But the Blues, just a real showcase in perseverance. I wouldn't say they're the pound-for-pound most talented team in the game, but they're the closest to winning the Stanley Cup this year. What can we learn from them?
Well, I think overall what we can learn is, and this is going down my road in terms of what I've been saying about the Leafs is, their forward lines, they have talent throughout, but, they've sprinkled a Zach Sanford, who's a workman-like player, or Sammy Blais in their top 9. So they have workers with talented guys like Perron or O'Reilly. They have a main line, Shen and Tarasenko and Jaden Schwartz, but, they have their worker bees as well. But the main talent on this team, I think the strongest area is on the blue line with Pietrangelo, with Parayko, with Bouwmeester, with Vince Dunn. I mean, their defense is really, really good. And I said in the conference finals, you look at San Jose, St. Louis, Boston, Carolina, all of them had strong defenses. So my philosophy, and I think that, we know that the NHL is a copycat league, is if you're loaded at forward and you're weak at defense, you're more than likely not going to get to the promised land. You have to have a defense that is deep and talented and multifaceted. And if you have that, you have as good a chance as anybody. So if Kyle Dubas is taking the lesson from
Mm-hmm.
that, I think you use your extreme depth at forward throughout the organization, and you have to try to add, I'd say, at least one and maybe two defensemen.
Skill and finesse, Mike. The league is changing. Ice capades over charades. That's the way it goes. Looking at your stuff on hockeybuzz.com. Nice grades, by the way. So I'm looking forward to grading this Leafs offseason. We can't do that yet because, the lesson is still being learned. The test comes very shortly. What do you think will be involved in this test? Which players do you think move out? And, we can talk about players who the Leafs might wrangle in at some point. But as of right now, we know Patrick Marleau is a guy we are about to say goodbye to. Nazem Kadri, unfortunate situation for him again in the playoffs. We love his jam. We love his makeup. But he's a player who's always left a little to be desired. And I don't know if that's by design or just the fact that he's in his own way. Do you think a change of scenery can help reorganize his career? Because, he's not getting any younger either.
Well, in terms of all the rumors about Kadri, I wrote how extensive the roster changeover was going to be. And, usually I'm the one who's out there on the edge, whereas other, more established insiders, guys who I respect, like Elliot Friedman or Drager or Pierre LeBrun, they'll say that there's going to be a few changes, but there's not going to be massive changes. Well, Friedman said last week it could be 6 or 7 players. It says for a team that was 6th overall in the NHL, there could be a lot of change, and I really agree with that. If you just, and I'm not going to go long on this, but if you go down their roster, I think Garrett Sparks is gone. I think they're going to look for a goaltender who can be more established and play 25 to 30 games, because the trend in the NHL is not to start your starters 65 to 70, which the Leafs have done with Freddie Anderson 2 of the last 3 years. On defense, more than likely, Zaitsev is definitely going to be gone. Gardner could be gone. Hainsey might only be back now because they have so many, the injury concern with Dermott and so many other players heading out. So you're talking 2, maybe 3 defensemen, and guys like Martin Marincin are definitely gone, and Ozaganov is going back to the KHL. And then you're talking, possibly Brown, possibly Nylander, possibly Kadri. You're talking 7, 8 players. That's 1/3 of your 23-man roster. That's significant change.
What does Kyle Dubas? What does he pull the trigger on? Does he see a bigger picture that some of us just are refusing to believe matters most? Or is he getting antsy now watching the Blues winning and the Bruins being who they are, and obviously the Raptors as the MLSNE brethren 2 wins away from winning an NBA championship? I'm not to say that there's a sense of urgency for Kyle Dubas and his portfolio, but the Leafs have a star-studded group of forwards. They have a group of forwards that can compete and contend. We know it, maybe with a tweak here and there. But it's the rest of the team, Mike, that still needs to be built upon. Does Kyle Dubas want to be a little more methodical beyond what fans want? Or is he looking at it in the same way Masai Ujiri did in the last offseason, building the Raptors? Let's make a stink here. Let's make a fuss and do something dynamic.
One of my colleagues at Hockey Buzz tweeted out something a couple days ago about, how Kyle Dubas will be looked at after this summer as opposed to last summer. After last summer he signs Tavares, and everything, he's the golden child, and now there are tough decisions to be made and trades that will significantly impact the future of the Maple Leafs, and what will the bloom be off the rose with Kyle Dubas. Now, I think he's a supremely confident guy. I've been in media scrums with him. I've talked to him briefly many times, and I think he knows hockey. I have
Mm-hmm.
confidence in him that he knows where he wants the direction of this organization to be. It's just a question now of how he can facilitate that. I look at what's been talked about over the last couple of weeks. I don't think it's going to be a problem for them to trade Zaitsev. They may have to take a salary back, but that might give them the opportunity to make an offer to Jake Gardiner to stay if they clear the $4.5 million Zaitsev salary. But if they have to take salary back, then it probably will be pretty tough. And I am not one of those people who thinks Jake Gardiner is going to be back, even though he apparently wants to come back and the Leafs want him to stay. The Patrick Marleau deal is going to be very tough because of the cap hit of $6.25 million. I know that Elliot Friedman said that basically it might be a scenario where a team that he gets traded to simply buys him out rather than soak up the cap hit. If they get a young asset, but do the Leafs want to add a Jeremy Bracco or a Timothy Liljegren or somebody like that to a Marleau deal simply to clear cap space? That's a very steep price. If it's a draft pick, okay, but an existing prospect who you put 2 or 3 years of development in, that's a tough price to pay. And Kadri, from everything I understand, they're getting lots of calls from other teams. It's not the Leafs shopping Kadri. It's the other teams sort of smelling blood seeing blood in the water and saying, okay, we have an opportunity to get a number 2 center who scored 30 goals years in a row. But it's not 100% that a Kadri deal couldn't be beneficial to the Leafs if they get the type of defenseman that they need in that deal. If they do, then I think it would be a step forward for the Leafs. The only thing I'm worried about is who's going to play the third line center, because we know that William Nylander can't, or at least Mike Babcock thinks he
Unless
can.
Kadri's part of a greater package, and I don't know how this comes together. You're not sending him away for a game-changing defenseman who's in his prime. If William Nylander and that contract is moved out, now we could be talking. But Kadri, I don't know if there's there's some bells and whistles attached to this guy that would make the buyer put the buyer in a little bit more of an advantage than the seller, because the buyer could say, well, look what happened in the playoffs. The guy comes and goes. Look where he is in his career. He's 10 plus years now. It's not as if the Leafs are in a massive position of power. Now, if they are getting a lot of calls on him, I mean, that gives them some food for thought. And if Kyle Dubas is thinking bigger picture, meaning the Leafs will be okay next year as some of the younger defensemen get into the mix and get their feet wet, will there be that urgency to make a deal to keep the Leafs among the top 3 or 4 teams in the league next year, when Dubas is thinking beyond next year? He's thinking of being competitive and being in contention for years to come.
Well, I think he has to think both. I think he has to think of the short term and the long term. The long term is Liljegren and Sandin and developing young players, and the pipeline is going to continue next year with, probably 3 or 4 Marlies moving up to the Leafs. I mean, I know that guys like Mason Marchment and Pierre Engvall and maybe a couple of those defensemen, are going to be in the mix for 4th line, and Trevor Moore could be even higher than 4th line next year. But in terms of the big defensemen and who you get for Nylander or Kadri, thing is, we don't know who other teams are really shopping. We've heard the PK Subban rumors. To me, it makes sense with 3 years left at $9 million, but it depends on what Nashville is looking for in a trade. So, I mean, that's one big name. You have TJ Brody and some of the Carolina defensemen who Carolina is looking probably to add offense, and guys like Pesce and Dougie Hamilton and Justin we talked about last year, they're probably going to be in the trade mix. So Alec Martinez from LA, now those are not top pairing guys except for maybe Subban. But that's the problem. The Leafs need more than just a top pairing guy. They need a top four guy.
Mm-hmm.
I think they need two really solid defensemen. So that's going to be the challenge. I mean, I people have said they would be selling low on Nylander. Nylander's value has not been undercut by 154 or whatever, how many games it was last year. His value is still high. If he has another bad year, then you're going to run into problems. So I think that trading him or trading Kadri, if you get that difference-making defenseman, is something that Kyle Dubas is pondering right now and may do.
The Nylanderites will tell you William Nylander is the best thing since sliced bread because of the 261-point seasons. Okay, that's cool. And they're lauding their guy. They're building their guy up. And I have nothing but respect for that. I seriously do. But, I mean, it's the potential of this guy. He's got plenty of potential. And let me just throw this out, Mike. If the Leafs were to bring back Gardner and Hainsey, all the guys were applauding for their efforts, but would like to see move on. I think that's a much more of a detriment than the team regressing slightly and letting the kids come through the system and get their feet wet. Before we go, real quick, the Raptors 2 wins away from the NBA championship. What'd you think of the minority owner for the Warriors, Mark Stevens, pushing Kyle Lowry in Game 3? It was just a Bush League move. I don't know what he was thinking, but you push a player of the opposing team for doing his job. I know he's on the sidelines on your wife or whatever. I mean, but it was just Bush League.
Banned for a year, which it's. I mean, maybe he ends up selling his minority share in the franchise. Yeah, it was just stupid. And when you do anything today, it's going to be captured on video. So you can't get away with a little shove. It was out there for everybody to see. And it was stupid. It was short-sighted. I mean, I'm sure probably he's rooting for his team that he owns part of, and there's a level of frustration because, frankly, the Raptors kicked the Warriors' ass. The Warriors are short-handed. They don't have Thompson. They don't have Durant. They don't have another one of their bench players. Okay.
But you're pushing a player?
Frustrated, but
you're pushing him?
But you're pushing a player? Yeah, no. That doesn't work in any sport, in any time. So, it was
well, I hope the Raptors can pull it off. It's still going to be tough, but, man, Golden State, for as great as they are, and they look like the Harlem Globetrotters out there sometimes, have not faced as responsible a defensive team as they are contending with now in the Toronto Raptors. It's a sight to behold. The Raps 2 wins away from an NBA championship. And we love the Leafs. We love hockey. We love the Stanley Cup. But in terms of global importance, winning an NBA championships times 5 over a Stanley Cup. I hate to say it, but it is true. It was a global sport, and this would be just, the Raptors are already on the scene. They've arrived. This would be huge for them. And in turn, huge for their MLSE brethren, for the Maple Leafs, and that's our main focus. Tyler Bozak, I hope he wins the Stanley Cup, man. I really do. Last word to you.
Yeah, Tyler Bozak and Carl Gunnarsson
and Alex Steen.
Scoring, and Alex Steen, who him and Carlo Koliakovo were traded for. Lee Stempniak, nice deal there, Cliff Fletcher. But Carl Gunnarsson scoring an overtime winner and saving the game yesterday with a play in the crease, and Bozak getting away with a penalty. I think, obviously Leaf fans would rather the Leafs win, but I think they would take a little bit of joy if a couple ex-Leafs had a key role in the Bruins' demise. One day,
the players who stay on the Leafs will go all the way and win a Stanley Cup. For now, it's ex-Leafs who are in position to do so. Let's applaud them, especially when they are hoisting that thing, and let's dream about our opportunity, and hopefully it comes soon. Michael P., have a good one, bud. We'll talk soon.
We would like to thank Vanguard Northeast Realty in Scarborough, title sponsor of the Leafs Convo, demonstrating passion for the industry and a superior level of excellence in selling, leasing, and marketing your property. Vanguard Northeast Realty.